Yeah. Hello, everyone. Let me first welcome you all, early birds, to this session, this webinar. I'm Nicole Northless, and this webinar is Beats and Lyrics to Go. We're going to discuss STEM and mental health through music, and we have the benefit of two presenters who presented at the COE annual conference in September. This was one of those sessions that folks said, hey, I need more of this. And for those that didn't get the information, we thought this would definitely be beneficial, especially one, how to utilize STEM and music, but particularly in this time, how we can support mental health through music. Our goal with this session is to not only provide you with the best information, but to also look down the road at how we will then build on music, STEM programming in your program, as well as mental health. So let me first, at this point, introduce our key presenters, Dr. Rafael Travis and Mr. Ray Cordero. So gentlemen, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Excellent. So I want to start by going right to the heart of what we do and share a little bit with you about something that we engaged in this last summer with our participants. And we held a week-long, what we call a MIXTAPE camp, which is an opportunity to really engage in the creative process, learn about music making, being creative, but also a chance to reflect and be in community with each other. And at the start of the week, we had a small group of really quiet, shy participants, kind of feeling each other out, trying to get a sense of who's in the room, excited to be there, but somewhat introverted. By the end of the week, we had really outgoing, just having a fantastic time. And what happened over the course of the week that became abundantly clear is that all of the participants had something to say. They had something inside that they wanted to be able to express. So much so that they were able to create some fantastic music, collaborate together. But even at the end of the week, there was so much enthusiasm and energy behind it. One of the participants said, I'd like to represent what we created visually. And that's the image that you see here. And just, want to get a sense, if you see an image like this, does this give off the impression of quiet, introverted, not really having anything to share with the world? No, it's actually quite the opposite, right? Not only do I have something to say, but I have something powerful that I want to shout and make sure that you listen to. And so in the chat, just curious, if we had to throw gender out there, what might be the first thing that comes to your head if you had to think about the gender makeup of this group? So just drop it in the chat. What are some of your initial top of mind thoughts about the makeup of this group?
And let me also ask Dr. Travis, we have a couple people raising their hand. Do you want me to engage with the hand raisers?
Yeah.
Okay. Martha Smith, yeah, your numbers are still rising, but it looks like Martha, you have your hand up.
Bunch of people putting in the chat. So we've got
yeah.
participation. All right, so we've got a lot of voices, males, equal, 50-50. Michelle, fierce, not only females, fierce females. Males. So we're across the board. Rhonda, females primarily. So Rhonda, Elizabeth, you are 100% right. This was all young women. These are all high school age girl participants. So that fierce female, that was 100% on. And so the title of the song that they created was "The Expression of My Weighted Word." Right? They all were able to engage, and that was the biggest part, right? It was clear they had something to get off of their chest, something that they wanted to say. And it was reflected not only in the words of the lyrics they created, it was reflected in the title, it was reflected in the imagery. And part of this process, we asked, like, what is the goal? What's the purpose of this? And so the purpose was just as much about sharing as it was about wanting to convey to the listener to be willing to speak up and share what you have to say. That was the goal. If someone hears this song, that they should feel encouraged and be open to making sure that their voice is heard. And so there was a level of self-awareness and social awareness that was incredibly powerful. And that's a big part of what this is about. And, so as we talk today, if there's nothing else that you take away, is I hope that you can take away that the young people that we're working with have something to say. And a lot of times it's creating a platform or a venue for them to be able to say what they need to say, from the cathartic sense of getting something out, telling their story from an identity standpoint, as people are continuing to negotiate their identity. And so I wanted to start there because, we're going to be talking about music engagement and STEM, but we're also talking about arts integration into that process, so that it's not only the academic, the learning, the demystifying of what STEM is, but it's also saving room for that personal growth and development, that well-being side that we know is critically important. So that's a big part of where I wanted to kind of anchor this conversation, so that we're at a similar starting point. So I'm Raphael Travis. I'm here at Texas State. I'm a professor in the School of Social Work. I'm also director of our MSW program here in the School of Social Work. And I have the good fortune of being here with my partner in crime, Mr. Ray Cordero. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ray Cordero. I serve as the Senior Director for TRIO programs here at Texas State. It's an honor to be here and to talk more about this work with Dr. Travis. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ray. And so another piece that's important as we think about sort of where this all started, my research is in two areas. It's in positive development, right? So thinking about the ways that we invest in young people's growth and development, as well as creative arts as a pathway to development. And so all of this work builds on research that we found about the effectiveness of music engagement, whether it's from an academic or educational standpoint, or whether it's from a mental health and well-being standpoint. But research is clear is that if we are able to provide space for active, intentional arts engagement, that can be beneficial for academic growth, for social and emotional growth. And our work is primarily with high school and college students, but also work with elementary and middle school students as well. And you can look up some of the publications that I have that cover that spectrum. So that's the background. That's where all of this started. So a little bit of what and why. We'll talk about the core original model, the STEM Beats model. We'll talk a little bit about empowerment, this idea of empowerment and growth and development. And then also more specifically about mental health. That's the rationale. That's the what and why behind this work and behind expanding the focus on STEM or STEAM. to consider some of these other areas as well. And we'll talk about how we've done it. There are 4 main projects that we worked on that capture a lot of this work, and I'll touch on a little bit of those just to give you an introduction. We don't have time to go in exhaustive detail on each, but I want to make sure that you have a clear idea. We want to make sure you have a clear idea of what we did, and hopefully in the future, if we have the opportunity to get together again, we can expand on some of these in a little bit more detail. So where does a lot of this work happen, both on campus and online? We have a sound lab, a music studio that we built and developed to help facilitate a lot of this work. And it gives hands-on opportunities using professional quality equipment and software, both for music education and well-being goals, and to reinforce music-related skills. Some people already have some skills when they come and participate. Some are starting from scratch, and we're able to accommodate all of those things. So a little bit more on what and why. So our original work started with a model. We had to have an idea of what we were trying to do and why. And from the onset, we wanted to approach STEM from the perspective of both demystifying what the STEM components are, science, technology, engineering, math, and not making it so heavy and otherworldly. The other part that we wanted to do was to think about ways that culture can intersect with those things. So the examples that I'll give in a little while will focus a little bit on the math dimension. Just from a time perspective, we'll dig in a little bit more on the math one, but recognize that we covered all these areas, and hopefully in the future we can spend a little bit more time. But it differs a little from other models, like for example, Science Genius is an outstanding arts-based model that looks at science and works very closely at helping to build enthusiasm and skills specifically around science content. It's a lyric-based approach. Outstanding work. You may be familiar with the work of Chris Emden, Hip Hop Ed, but this differs a little bit. So, for example, for us, when we looked at science, we're thinking about, what is scientific inquiry, the scientific method? What does it mean to investigate, to experiment, and to look at all different aspects around the enterprise of science? And so, we did that with lots of areas. So math, we're concerned about thinking about analyzing problems, thinking about solutions, but within the context of people's lived experience, right? So where does math intersect with healthy development? Where does math intersect with ideas of mortality, morbidity, inequities, disparities that exist in the world, right? So sort of the real world, thinking about and analyzing the real world through the lens of math. And you'll see some of those examples in a little while. So I just wanted to give you an overview of the model that this approach takes. A little bit different than some other approaches to STEM, but this is what anchors our work. And so, as I mentioned, we have a studio. And so a big part of how we got to those points was through the lens of hip hop culture. So let's unpack hip hop as a culture, more than what you listen on the radio, but the full breadth of the culture as a way to have some of these STEM related conversations, to think about activities. That's where we came at it from. And the studio helped us in a lot of ways, as well as a lot of other things that we'll talk about as we go. And so at the end of the day, our goal was obviously to introduce, as I said before, demystify some of these STEM concepts, help people think about, engineering from a design and precision standpoint, right? Think about technology from a need and innovation standpoint, thinking about how technologies unfold over time. Think about all of these STEM concepts, but in a way that facilitates healthy development, right? So those things were not separated, right? So as much as we focus on STEM, it is in partnership with a focus on building confidence, a focus on building healthy belonging and community, a focus on building positive, supportive relationships, a focus on not just the academic skills that people traditionally associate with STEM, but also social and emotional skills. So all of those things are together. And that's the main premise behind our work. Those things can't be separated. The other part to this is thinking about making sure that we recognize that people's lived experiences and culture are part of this conversation. So any conversation, any activity that we have, it is in partnership with thinking about the real world. So that social awareness, that self-awareness, that's part of it. And thinking about the entire life course. So it's not just about now. What does this mean for the long term? So these are all part of our conversations in every activity, every meeting. It's all grounded in these areas. So I wanted to help you understand how STEM and well-being and mental health fit together within our model. So what else? What else is important? So in these conversations, it's crystal clear how much we emphasize that context influences well-being and thus mental health. So just a little bit of background. I'm sure many of you are familiar with a lot of these mental health trends, but again, so that we're on the same page, just wanted to underscore a few things. So thinking about most recent years, and this is pre-COVID, right? Pre-COVID, over 1/3 of high school students reported feeling sad or depressed, and these are, the window is in the last 2 weeks. And so when we think about how this breaks down by gender, it's twice as likely for female respondents, right? Twice as likely, 46% compared to 26%. And this is pre-COVID. So we're talking about roughly 1 in 2. So how many do we have? We have 112 participants on here. If this was a pool of students, you do the proverbial look to your left, look to your right. Half of us, half of participants that identify as a woman in this would say they report being sad or depressed in the last 2 weeks. That's an enormous amount. We think about our youth. And even 1 in 4 is a lot, to not minimize the impact on men. So when we start to look at intersectionalities, whether it's by race or ethnicity, or maybe sexual identity, we start to really, those numbers mushroom, right? So here, looking at Latinx men, 29% feeling sad or depressed compared to 50% of Latinx women. Again, these are pre-COVID statistics, right? So then when we factor in the layer of COVID and mental health, we see, and I only have time to report, but if you look, the numbers are staggering, right? So according to Mental Health American Screening Program, more people reported thoughts of suicide and self-harm in 2020 than any other year since 2014, since it launched in 2014. In September, 37% of people reporting having thoughts of suicide, more than half or nearly every day, 37%. Again, intersectionality standpoints, suicidal ideation is highest among youth, especially LGBTQ youth. In September of this year, over half of youth, 11 to 17, that identifies LGBTQ reported having thoughts of suicide or self-harm, more than half or nearly every day in the previous 2 weeks. So that really disturbing report of the 11-year-old that shot himself during class on camera last week. I'm at a university here. The reports out of the counseling center are through the roof, right? So mental health is real. And this is, pre-COVID. And so it's been a priority for us because we know the trends, we recognize the trends, and we know that it's our role to play a part in trying to make things a little bit better. So I wanted to kind of, help level set of what and why we're taking the approach that we're taking to this work. And a lot of it is anchored in what we do through the Sound Lab. So these are just an image of some of the equipment that we have. So we have the push, we have laptop setups, speakers, we have all the professional software. We have DDJ or turntable controllers. We have keyboards. So everything that a person would need to be able to make high quality, not just to make music, but to make high quality music is there. We have a producer that works with us, not somebody that just knows how to use things, but is active in the music industry, understands multiple genres, understands how to work well with young people to capture their ideas. So that's a big part of what we bring to the table. So I want to talk a little bit about the 4 different big projects that we had. So in year 1, we started off heavily with a STEM focus and essentially did 8 weeks of STEM. And you saw what the model was, and our goal was to touch on each of the major areas twice. The first is more of an introduction, the second opportunity to really deepen the experience and the dynamic nature of the activities. We had the most incredible partners to join with us, people from the music industry, people that have a long history of working with young people, educators. You'll see that Dr. Crook was here from Australia. It was just really, really incredible. But we took the approach to explore each of the areas twice, again, to introduce and to then move into a little bit more depth. Saul Paul is, you'll see on the left, he is known as the musician with a message. And he helped lead some dynamic workshops around engineering, thinking about engineering in the more traditional sense, as well as music engineering. But the nature of his work, musician with a message, is all about empowerment, incredible artist. Yeah, Dr. Elliot Gann from Today's Future Sound, who works closely with young people around the globe, teaching them their beat making under the model of therapeutic beat making. We had, again, Dr. Crook, also from Australia. We had Marty Kaysen. We had other artists that came through. And each of these 4 areas, hopefully you'll see a little green star up here on the right. And that's basically, hopefully in the future, we can explore these in more depth. And, we can go, what does the entire session look like? What is what does an engineering session look like? What does the science lesson look like? But I'll give you an example with math. And the way that we approached a lot of these is to think about some of the work as a pop-up museum, an interactive museum. And this is one that we did. We called it 2 + 2 = trauma. And it was an interactive exhibit using existing art as a way to really unpack and explore both, well, this was for math, but for STEM issues, but also explore some real world issues. So we got to think about stress, trauma, addiction, poverty, community violence, excessive force, but also from the empowering and well-being side, concepts of resilience, strength, supportive relationships, and opportunities for healthy coping. So it's that balance, right? It's that balance of real world issues as well as what are pathways to well-being. So think of this as like an interactive, and we decked out the classroom. We literally created an interactive exhibit within a classroom. So we had large posters on the walls. We had reading materials. We had some videos going that people could sit down with their headphones. We had some other computer where people could scroll through and look at things. So we really created an interactive exhibit based on the content of 2 songs. So we unpacked the lyrics and created this exhibit. And so that's a big part of this work. It's how do you use what you know in a way to make it accessible from an academic learning standpoint, but fold in those social and emotional aspects as well. So one of the posters you'll hear, these are lyrics to the song, right? My mom used to pray she see me and yell, it's messed up, she's got to see me in jail. So this is interactive. So I got a question mark here. So in the chat, I want you to think expansively, right? Use your creative juices. Just type some things in the chat. Just from that little phrase, if we had to think in terms of math concepts, what might be some either topics that you would potentially be able to extrapolate from that, and what might be some math concepts that you could fold in just from that stanza, right? My mom used to pray she'd see me and yell, it's messed up, she's got to see me in jail. Want to see how creative we can get here. And I'll continue to talk, but use the chat to type in either an issue or concept that you could unpack based on that, or some math elements or concepts that you might be able to extrapolate just from that little sentence. And I'll continue talking as we see some of the responses chime in. So one of the things that, we pulled out, we teased out, was Black and Latino students who score above average on the SAT or ACT attend selective colleges at a lower rate than white students with the same qualifications, right? So obviously here we could explore maybe SAT trends, ACT trends. We can explore enrollment rates, look at potential disparities that exist there. But some people might have an issue with that. They may critique that, say, well, selectivity, that's, it's not really a big deal. People overblow this idea of what's selective and what's not. A good quality education is a good quality education, right? So that people may have an issue with that concept of a selective college, right? It's not really important. But the other piece is, even if you don't believe that about selectivity, in 2015, selective colleges, right, in 20 states spent at least $15,000 more on students for support, right? 2.5 times as much as less selective. So there are 2 pieces there. There's the support that people receive, right? Oftentimes support helps you matriculate, right? That's what keeps people there. That's what helps. But also the cost differences, right? So I've seen some great answers coming in here, right? Choices, lack thereof, discount rates, right? So income support, financial support. We have inequality in the school to prison pipeline, distances from the population center, right? Cost of transportation, cost of communication, right? Whether it's digital, electronic, that's a big issue. And I don't think I have the slide in here, but that's one that we talk about. We talked about it in depth, and we had the breakdown of, there was a lawsuit around the price of calls that came out of it. We talked all about that as well, right? Proportion of who's at Yale versus who's in jail, right? Excellent. So this is a big part of it. So you all are on the right page, right? So we can be incredibly creative how we fold in these concepts. All right. thank you all for those that responded. Another piece in here, we have, this is another lyric. And so these are all posters. These are all real posters that were posted up, just as a selection. There were a lot more, but these are some of them. So on the right side, you see a quote from J. Cole. This song was Friends. The other song was Trauma from Meek Mill. But the quote here is all sorts of trauma from the drama that children see, type of stuff normally would call for therapy, but you know just how it goes in our community. Keep it inside, no matter how hard it be, right? So that opens up a conversation about how people cope with challenging things, right? It's not passing judgment on a life experience with challenges and adversity, but it's an open question on how do you deal with it? And you'll see in the middle is a statistic: 1 in 4 people with a mood or anxiety disorder use alcohol or drugs to relieve their symptoms, right? And that's a big part of the theme of that song, Friends by J. Cole. And so this is an open conversation to begin to explore, how do people cope? How do people handle these things? And we know that mental health is rising, so that's a fair question. So we can begin to have conversations with young people of how do you handle it, right? When you're anxious, when you're sad, when you're depressed, or how do people around you handle it, right? How did you learn to do these things, right? So these are opportunities to have conversations. We can continue to explore trends and statistics and things like that. It's not meant to go over the top with the statistics, but it's simply to help, think about math and understanding trends in a way that touches on some real world issues. We did a lot, but I want to point to this last piece here. You'll see on the left poster, meditate, meditate, don't medicate, right? This was a part of that song too. And we actually introduced a video at the end. So at the end of the tour, right, the museum tour, this was at the very end, was the meditate part. And so we collectively, after doing lots of discussions and talking through things, we collectively watched the video, the live performance video for J. Cole with this song. And what was important about the live version of the video is it had a lot of young people on the stage with him talking about meditation, doing some of the common poses that people have when they meditate. So it gave that visual connection. But we actually brought in a person to guide all the students through a guided meditation, right? So to bring it all full circle. And it was an opportunity to, check in. And you always have, right? Is this worthwhile? Is this silly? And it's a great opportunity to explore, right? Sometimes somebody might hear meditation and they have whatever assumption or bias they think is there, but to actually do it and to make an assessment of, did this make me feel better? How was this? Can go a really long way. And we found that it was beneficial. And we know that, there's lots of research that talks about the benefit of meditation. But I wanted to walk you through this so that you can understand how you can take a piece of art and really unpack it in some really dynamic and important ways. And there was a lot more to this, and we can go into more depth, about what the activity was. But this was 1 week of and we had 2 weeks, so we did different things for our math section. But this was one of our math workshops. It was interactive museum, and there were lots of really dynamic and exciting pieces. So I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a flavor for, one of our 8 weeks from that initial week. And that was the approach that we took to all 8 weeks, not necessarily with the interactive museum, although we did it for some other things as well. But that was the approach. How do we create an experience for our young people that can touch on all the objectives that we want to touch on in a meaningful way? All right, so our second big activity was our mixtape camp, for our first mixtape camp. So I created the posters. Yeah. So that was a chance to get my creative juices flowing. But we can talk about, there are some great programs that can assist the process. And, again, hopefully we can get together and we can really kind of talk through how we do this. But it is something that is, you can 100% do, is definitely within your skill set. All right, so our first mixtape camp was summer 2019. This is in our studio. You have our in-house producer, our secret weapon, Daniel, and he can do everything. He's a super producer, as they would say. And on the right, we had Dr. Ian Levy. He does some similar work around creating music within a studio environment up in New York. You may have seen some of his work in the research as well, but he flew down. We facilitated the workshop together and combined our two models, which was really, really exciting. And you can see there's a publication related to this because we actually folded in a really interesting research question. So the research suggests that this process should work, right? It should facilitate, less anxiety and depression based on prior research that both of us have done. But what we added to the research question was, does facilitation style matter? And essentially we had 3 groups come through with us. The first group was super structured, right? We said, you're gonna do this, do this, do this, do this, right? So 100% structured. The second group had a little bit more autonomy. So we had some structure, say you're gonna do this, but you have some choices here. You could do this or this. Here, you could do this or this, right? So we introduced a lot of choice into that. The third group, we had very little structure. Basically, we said, you can do whatever you want. At the end of the week, you just have to do something. And so what we wanted to see was, would either of those facilitation styles make a difference? The publication is out there, you can see it. It's under Levy and Travis, and who's the third author on that? I think it may be Jenkins, but it's a 2020 publication, just came out, but you can see how that went. Incredibly exciting. But that was our camp from the second year. We had those 3 groups go, and we had them generate their own lyrics, create their own beats in partnership in the studio. There's a process that happens to go through that where we're really trying to build up the social and emotional components in addition to the traditional music skills and the hands-on activity. You can see some of the words here. But in terms of impact findings, we found significant reductions in stress, anxiety, and depression. And real quick, in the chat, I want you to vote. Which of the 3 groups, so we saw positive impacts across all, but which of the 3 groups do you think had the most significant? They were all effective, but which do you think was the most effective? Group 1, group 2, or group 3? Okay, so we've got no structure, so we got group 3. We've got 1 for group 2, we got 1 for group 1. All right. So real quick, group 3, we thought after the first day, group 3 was off the hook. They were all over the place. They were laughing and joking in a good way. It wasn't bad, but we were like, there's no way. Well, and then when they said what they wanted to do, so the first 2 groups had to do a song. The first group, we said it needs to be a social justice song. The second group, we said it could be any topic song that you want. They worked together to figure out. And the third group, we didn't even say it had to be a song. We just said you have to do something. At the end of the first day, they said not only did they want to do a song, they wanted to do a video. We were like, there's no way they're going to do a song and a video. especially as like, I'm telling you, they were all over the place. So long story short, it was group 2 that was the most effective, whereas a little bit of structure and a little bit of autonomy, right? It was that nice balance that we were aiming for. But group 3, not only did they do a song, they did do a video, and it was amazing. So point being, there were a lot of lessons learned in this piece. All of those strategies work, but it depends on, you know, what you're going for, right? You have some agency as a facilitator in how you want to go about things, and the results will differ depending on how you do it. All right, so great votes, thank you. Desiree, Sharon, Owen, you were correct in group 2, and now we affectionately call that the group 2 method. You'll see when we talk about Mixtape Camp 2, we did one group and we did the group 2 method. All right, so just wanted to pull out the hook on one of these songs so that you could get a feel. I can't tell what boxes are covering what on the screen, so I apologize if it's covering any of the text. So quick pop quiz. All right, so on the left, you see the hook to one of the songs for one of the groups, or this was in the process of creating the hook. So it wasn't the final version, but it was a close to final version. And so thinking about, you know, one of our objectives to promote social and emotional growth, I want you to type in the chat any of these common SEL concepts, right? So when we talk about social emotional learning, we talk about self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, self-awareness, talking about decision-making. And so based on what you see here from this hook, type in the chat any of these SEL concepts that, the big buckets, not the bullets, but any of those 5 big buckets. Do you see any of those reflected in the words of the hook? Self-awareness, relationship skills, self-awareness, right? Absolutely. Social awareness, right? So it's important, you know, when we think about, you know, as they're creating, as we have the chance to reflect and process and talk about, what did you mean when you were talking about this, or what were you trying to convey? Are there better words that can convey this? Does this fully, right? As you're just simply processing through the hook and creating the hook, you know, or chorus that the students want to go with, these are all SEL, this is all SEL development, things that we can reinforce and validate and unpack and explore, right? Simply through creating the hook. And again, you know, all this is based in research, right? And so, you know, my particular model, individual and community empowerment, is grounded in the concept that there are these 5 empowerment themes that regularly show up in music, whether it's music that you hear on the radio, or it's music that people create, that young people create for themselves, right? We constantly see dimensions of esteem, resilience, growth, community, and change, community change, social change, right? And so as we're going through the Mixtape Camp, as we're going through our academic year work, and we're engaging with music, we're constantly touching on these 5 themes of empowerment. All right, so what's our time looking like here? All right, 15 minutes. So our third thing to talk about was year 2, right? So we've gone through a full year of STEAM, gone through the summer, we had a great camp, we came back, and in the last year, we decided to focus a little bit more squarely on mental health and well-being. And we still did all of the same activities, those similar types of activities in terms of creating music and talking about music, but we focused a little bit more thematically on mental health and well-being. And so instead of, each week kind of being anchored in a STEM concept, it was anchored in one of these themes of empowerment that we talked about before, and then something on top of that, right? So for example, in week 1, remember we focused, esteem was the big bucket of empowerment that we focused on, but we talked a lot about the concept of colorism and identity, right? And we look globally, right? To recognize how colorism is doesn't just happen in the US, right? It's a global phenomenon. And so we looked at India, we looked at the Caribbean and Central America and South America, and all around the globe. We used a song Complexion from Kendrick Lamar and Rhapsody as one of the anchor songs to begin talking about these things. But we had maps and we had all sorts of information and activities and things like that. We talked about the transatlantic slave trade, right? How did it become that there was this issue of skin tone in South America and Central America, right? A lot of kids don't know that the bulk of the transatlantic slave trade, very few came to the United States. That's something that young people really don't know, but we looked at the maps, so there's this combination of academics as well as all these things. So each month we did these types of things where we're looking at a dimension of empowerment, we're folding it in with current events, real world activities, and making an experience. We usually have some sort of music-based something to explore, and then the opportunity for them to create, get in the studio and create on their own. So again, these are things that we can go into more depth and talk about, what did this look like? How might this, we do something similar? We can unpack it in the future, but I wanted to kind of give you a big picture of what we were trying to do throughout the second year. Let's see. This is just an example of one of the things that we were looking at change. We used the song All Right. We looked at clips from songs, video series, Songs That Shook America. So it's not just, that's a big part of this too. While a lot of it is hip hop, it's not at all just hip hop. There's lots of music that we explore. When we were looking at social change, we were looking at how people can use their voice for things that they care about, the communities that they care about, whatever it is, right? We talk about community broadly, right? Community could be age, it could be gender, it could be school, it could be neighborhood, it could be family, it could be race or ethnicity, it could be lots of different things. But how do you use your voice for the communities that you care about? At the time, stop and frisk and law enforcement issues, those were big. So we used that as the context to help them begin to have some of these conversations. But then we looked globally as well. Looked at artists from different places. So Il Nomadic, he's from Iran, but also Hawaii. So we explored what was going on in Iran at the time. We looked at Omar Effendim from Syria. We looked at what was going on in Syria. An artist called Dreaming Now from Australia, talking about issues that are going on in Australia. So we looked at these different voices where people were talking about things that they care about, just to think about how people approach change in different places. All right, and so we did that throughout the year. So our fourth bucket was this past summer. Seems like it was just yesterday, but also in a completely new environment, right? This was right smack dab in the middle of the COVID era. And, we began to, the writing was on the wall in the spring that things weren't going to be the same. And so we had to make that pivot online. And for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, we wanted to continue the work that we're doing because we feel like it's important and valuable and meaningful. But we also have a really good understanding of what the impact is going to be for COVID on mental health. A big part of the original sort of summer programming was based on some of my earlier research and this concept of summer strain, right? The recognition that once kids leave school, they leave a lot of supportive relationships. They become there's a lot more exposure to any family stress or instability that maybe school provides a buffer for. We know food insecurity is a big issue. So anyway, we knew that that's important in general, and we knew that COVID was simply going to exacerbate all of that, right? And so we really wanted to be able to engage. So we took the platform online. And so I know we're limited time, so I'm just going to kind of go a little bit faster through this part. Again, we did our hybrid model with me and Dr. Levy's model. Everything that we did in person, we then brought it online. We worked to figure out how it could be done similarly, differently. I'm not going to pretend that it was all incredibly smooth, but we really were intentional about trying to bring it to life online. All the processes were the same. The major thing, there were a lot of tweaks and things like that. The major thing was figuring out a platform that would allow students to work together collectively, both on the beat side and then lyrics. And so the combination of Zoom and a platform called Soundtrap allowed us to be able to make the music online. And I'll just show you what it looked like. So this was, so these are high school age students. These were trio participants, upper bound participants. And just to show you what the screen looks like, so the youth worked together to create the beat. And this was a process, right? So we had everybody created their own beat. And then we tried to figure out what do we like? How could we integrate? So the beat that they ended up with was a combination of things that they put together, and then working with the producer, how to create something that captured a little bit of everybody's input. All the people that wanted to create lyrics participated. So we ended up having 3 lyricists in the final song, but everybody contributed something to the track over the course of the week. And so this was just kind of the visual sample of the expression of my weighted voice that came out this last year. So we're continuing with the sort of new COVID profile. It's going to be online. We're experimenting with more drop-in, allowing people to drop in addition to being consistent. The theme is around the globe. And so we're looking at South Africa, the United States, the UK, India, Hawaii, Australia, Latin America, to look at regional types of music to have some of the same conversations that we've had in the past. This is an example of something that we would do for the US, that we will do for the US section. G Herbo talks about PTSD. It'll begin a chance to talk about some of his work, his community work, to help young people that experiences some of the trauma and challenges that he did. So just wanted to give you an example of what we would do today that's in the same spirit of our work. So I know we've got about 5 minutes left, and I do want to bring Ray back in and kind of open up the platform to some questions. But at the end of the day, we feel that this work is incredibly important and meaningful. We believe in the simultaneous focus on academic as well as social and emotional growth. We remain flexible. We remain grounded in research. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we believe that our young people do have something to say, and it's up to us to provide a space and a platform for their growth and the ability to share their voice. So thank you all so much. Hopefully we can get together in the future. And so we'll open it up to some questions for the last few minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Travis, for presenting that work. We have a question from Marlene Wu, who's asking if it's possible to play the song or snippet of the song that the students put together.
Yeah, we can do that.
While Dr. Travis is
find it, while we answer some other questions.
While Dr. Travis is pulling that up, if you have questions, please ask them in the text box. Part of what I wanted to talk to you all about as well is the second part of this webinar, which is going to be to discuss the administrative red tape. How do you actually get this formulated and constructed within your programs? What does it look like for allowable cost, for budgets, for staffing, for timelines, for locations, for all of those pieces? And how do you root out the quote unquote, he's irreplaceable. Let's make sure we know that. But how do you root out a Dr. Travis in your area? How do you root out music industry professionals in your area? That's going to be another piece of what we're going to talk about in a subsequent webinar. Additionally, pieces that I think deserve attention would have to do with the storytelling that comes with this kind of work. I think it's important that we validate not only our students, but the work by creating partnerships, whether they're existing, you build on those partnerships and alliances with your institutions. I believe that it does provide more attention, more political capital in terms of what you're doing on your campus and how this work matters, and the transferability of it, not just from TRIO students, but the potential to work with students that are also at your host institution is huge. It's something we're exploring now as well. So that's going to be coming up. Please keep an eye out from COE regarding those webinars to talk about some of the more nuts and bolts of how you get something like this put together. But in the meantime, while Dr. Travis is looking up that work from our students, were there other questions that we could answer? You can put them in the chat box if you'd like.
And Ray, I recall you had a clip that you were considering running. I know we've only got a couple minutes, but we can go over a little bit if that'll help people get a sense if you want to run that 2-minute clip.
Absolutely, I will.
Okay.
And I see that Jennifer has a question. This was a fantastic presentation. I'm curious how interested the students were in participating in the project, or were they reluctant or excited and willing to participate? I think we had a mixture of all kinds. We had students that were really excited. We had students that were reluctant, because anytime you talk about self-expression or any of these kind of things, and the way that Dr. Travis marketed it was very unique in terms of making sure that there was a safe community, a community that was supportive. But I think you're going to see a spectrum of students across the grid. And I think it has to do with how you market and present this, just like anything else. There's one thing I was talking to TRIO professionals about the other day, and that is COVID has really added an additional bullet point to your job description that you previously had. It just wasn't as emphasized, and that is to be a salesperson. You have absolutely got to sell everything that you're doing, and sell it aggressively a lot of times for students. So I think you'll find students across the spectrum. As far as students assigned to the 3 different groups, I'll let Dr. Travis answer that here in a second. I know I see him trying to pull up some stuff. Let me pull up this video for you all, and hopefully this will give you an idea. This is a recap of what we've worked on. We put this together to present actually at the national conference for COE. So let me show you all this.
We have been able to blend the understanding that when young people are engaged in school, it's for much more than academics. It's for academic development for sure, but it's also for social and emotional development.
I was in the lyrics team, and within that lyrics team, I was able to express myself creatively through words and then through rhyme within those words. It was really fun for sure. Going to see if I can try doing it again within my spare time.
So this lab is a great opportunity. We have been able to run different music workshops and classes before, but never really had a dedicated space in general, but also a dedicated space with industry level equipment, software, technology, as well as the structured opportunity for an audio engineer, someone that is in the music business, to work directly with young people.
When I started with music, it's actually showed me like a path to go. I could actually have the confidence to express what I want to say. You know, I'll always use music to help me relieve my stress. I put my earphones in, I close my eyes, and when I listen to certain artists sing their songs, they always send me a message.
All right, hopefully everybody saw that.
Mhm.
How many students participated was another question that we just had. Were they required to participate? No, they weren't. And typically, Dr. Travis preferred a cohort of around 15 to 20 students, no more than that amount, just because it was small group work. What we did, and this is part of the nuts and bolts of what we put together, was on our Saturdays, we typically offered this. So as an elective sort of course, students had this opportunity, but there were, of course, requirements for students to opt out of their academic requirements that we had to provide within Upward Bound. And so that's how we put that together. You really have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want to do this and how you want to facilitate it. I think it's a matter of looking at what your program is currently operating with and how this can fit into that. I'll yield back to Dr. Travis for our last bit of our time. I think he has pulled up that song.
You're on mute, Dr. Travis.
I'm muted. Yeah. So during the year, as Ray said, 15 to 20 students. During the camp, we had 3 groups of 6 for camp 1. And then camp 2, this last year over COVID, we just had 6. We just did 1 group instead of the 3 groups. And that's the balance, right? That's a lot of the balance of this work. Are you trying to do something for a lot of people? Or are you trying to do, a more in-depth experience for a small group? Because there's trade-offs, right? In terms of the level of depth, how much you're able to kind of validate each person's experience. And so those are all conversations, your team, what is your vision for your participants? And you make some decisions on that end. So if we have a couple minutes, do we have a couple minutes just to play? It's about a 3-minute track. Does that work?
Sure, go ahead.
Where did it go? I'll pull it back up here.
Ambition, never give up, I got the wisdom, just listen. The ancestors showing me the vision. We going to the top, TTP, we throwing shots. We set our own limits, show you what we got. Ambition, never give up, I got the wisdom, just listen. The ancestors showing me the vision. We going to the top, TTP, we throwing shots. We set our own limits, show you what we got.
I'm going straight to college, getting educated knowledge. Getting stacks and put it in my big fat wallet. Once I was a young boy that said I couldn't play. They would kick me around and throw me in the shade. It's not about the wealth, I did this for myself. Now I'm hanging picture frames, my family on the shelf. 4-year degree, that's the vision that I see. Door to success, and I'm trying to find the key.
Ambition, never give up, I got the wisdom, just listen. The ancestors showing me the vision. We going to the top, TTP, we throwing shots. We set our own limits, show you what we got. Ambition, never give up, I got the wisdom, just listen. The ancestors showing me the vision. We going to the top, TTP, we throwing shots. We set our own limits, show you what we got. I was taught how to survive so I can grow up and thrive. Keeping up working hard to succeed is my pride. But don't try to hide from other people's sins. It's better to be wise and be your own guys. Don't cut the ties. I can see it in your eyes. I can see that you could fly higher than the Everest sky. Shout out Dr. Travis, he is the guy. Remember our names, we're going worldwide. Ambition, never give up. I got the wisdom, just listen. The ancestors showing me the vision. We're going to the top. TTP, we throwing shots. We set our own limits, show you what we got. Ambition, never give up. I got the wisdom, just listen. The ancestors showing me the vision. We're going to the top. TTP, we throwing shots. We set our own limits, show you what we got. Period.
All right.
I love it.
So, yeah, that was them. But thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about our work. I can't wait till we get to do it live and in person again. Online is great, but in person is magical.
Right, all the energy. Yeah, well, thank you. Let me just say, I don't know if it looks like folks are checking off. We are over. For those that stayed, thank you. I knew it would be amazing and you'd really get value. And to that, let me also say thank you, Dr. Travis. Thank you, Ray, for doing this session. And I'm looking forward to how we then roll out with that additional information. So for all the attendees, definitely stay tuned. We'll be sure to post that information on COE's newsletter weekly, and continued success, and hopefully you'll be able to engage your students. Be well, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for attending, everybody. Take care.
Take care, everybody.